Rockefeller warning, don't make this mistake with your legacy. If you make the wrong moves here, it could cost your entire family legacy. We're going to talk today about the Rockefeller method and how to identify misinformation and how to avoid mistakes. The first piece we're going to talk about is not having the right insurance. You know, things like universal life is not going to work with this. And not having the right trust. Some people don't know whether they should have an irrevocable trust. When does that make sense versus a revocable trust? And what is a trust? How do you make sure to avoid probate, which means it goes through the court system, everything becomes public knowledge, and you have to pay the courts or your heirs do? Or not creating a perpetual trust. You have to pick the right state. If you pick the wrong state, you know what? This thing isn't going to work. And you don't have to be super wealthy to make this happen. As a matter of fact, I started when I was 19 years old, before married, before having kids, was just $50 a month. This is all about making it accessible and available and understandable. So a trustee is, when you're gone, who kind of manages the trust, but you need to have different ones. Distribution trustee handles funds. Insurance trustees handles what happens with the insurance proceeds that come in and the policies that might be on your kids and grandkids. And if you have investments, there might be an investment trustee. We'll go through all of that. And look, if you don't have your trust owned, if you don't have your trust own your assets or listed as your beneficiary, that's a major problem. Or if you don't plan for incapacity along the way, a lot of people don't have what's known as a power of attorney or a medical directive, like a living will. And now your family, well, there's a really famous case called the Terry Schiavo case where she was a vegetable and they kept her on life support till it depleted all of the family's wealth because there wasn't a medical directive there. When my grandfather died, he was so loved and adored, the glue of the family, but we set up a medical directive and a living will so my grandma didn't have to make the tough choice. It was what they made together beforehand, and it didn't have all the sibling fighting of what should be done or not be done. And so if you have any special needs, like sometimes people have kids with learning issues or certain disabilities, and if you don't have a special needs trust, well, guess what? You could lose government assistance programs. You might not give them enough distribution to handle certain things. And ultimately, this is the biggest problem. When people plan improperly, they end up dividing the money, distributing it, and destroying the legacy. What we're going to talk about here today is how do you protect it, perpetuate it, and preserve it. And the good news is I've got my co-author of What Would the Rockefellers Do, Michael Isom. We've known each other, what year, 99? 1999. That's wild.
It's fun.
You know?
It's really fun,
just
Garrett.
Aggressively wanting to learn.
Yeah.
I just was like, I'm going to learn and figure this out. I mean, my dad's a coal miner, an amazing man, worked so hard, didn't know a lot about this. My grandfathers were coal miners. They didn't really know a lot about this. So I didn't walk into money. The fortunate thing is, my parents are just so amazing and loving parents. So I'm so lucky that way for sure. And I would take that any day because they instilled certain values in me. But the reality is kind of had to figure out this money thing. And I mean, what about you?
Yeah, same for me. My dad was a truck driver and he literally worked himself into the ground. He retired.
I went to his funeral with you.
Yeah, exactly. He retired at age 65 off of $1,100 a month Social Security income. That's it. And then he lived 5 more years and died at the age of 70 by a massive heart attack. His health, mentally and physically just wasn't there for him. And he was miserable. Yeah, and my sister and I wrote checks when he was buried.
Yeah. And you've completely transformed what's going to happen with your family because not only did you implement this methodology with yourself, you've been dedicated, like you're masterful one-on-one with people and inspiring them with a story and getting connected to that. And also, like, this has been a never fail me strategy, and I did veer from it at times.
Yeah.
And it cost me.
Yeah.
Because greed set in. I remember I was standing in this line. I was in a wedding, and I'm not the best man, but I'm one of the groomsmen, and I'm standing next to another groomsman. He's like, dude, why aren't you doing more hard money lending? Like, you can make points on the loan. You could set up a fund. So many people. And he's like, you're just walking away from millions of dollars. And I was in my 20s, and that greed gland got so big. And I was like, I couldn't even enjoy that night because I was like, why am I not doing this? And I got involved in something that I didn't enjoy, that I didn't necessarily want to do. I just wanted to make the money on it. And guess what? There's a lot of risk in hard money lending, especially if you're funding developments. So you become the short-term financing before they get a bank loan. And if they can't get the bank loan, you now have to foreclose on the property or work with them. Or if the economy changes, and what happened in 2008 is it just devastated that fund.
Yeah.
And I had to look people in the eye and say, yeah, this thing's massively underperforming.
Yeah.
We're not in a good place.
Yeah. And are you an expert on selling whatever collateral there was left?
I didn't want to even, not only did I not want to be an expert, I didn't want to take my time to do that, but I had made that commitment because I thought this is easy. I got 2 other experts, but one of them ended up breaking his back and had to work from his bed and eventually died. And then the other one just had so much going on, not just what he was doing in the fund. And so that it spread him super thin, and it was so much chaos so fast because I was young and I didn't know about economic cycles yet because I'd only been through in the 90s. I'm like, this is amazing. I was starting in 98. I'm like, this is great. Money's easy. And then, in 2002, the real estate market really started to climb. I'm like, this is just, my net worth's going up by $1 million this quarter. And I was like, it was nothing that was fun. It was just chasing the money.
Yeah.
And so the Rockefeller method brings a level of certainty and stability that even if you do other things that have a little bit more risk, you have a foundation that you can count on, and you don't disinherit your family, and you don't put yourself at risk. Like those tough years, I always liked that I had this Rockefeller method because I'm like, okay, if I know I have that for sure.
Yeah.
It became this peace of mind.
Yeah. 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 And everybody that I meet with, Garrett, they have their own story around this. I certainly have mine. I didn't grow up with money. Thank God my dad did teach me the value of hard work and working. And so in 7th grade, I went to work for Cycletown Yamaha in St. George, Utah.
Yeah, man, you were big on motocross and racing.
It was a big part
you're
of my
world
life.
champion Can-Am racer.
Yeah, eventually down the road. But in 7th grade, I was making $2.25 an hour. But that's how I paid for things that I wanted, right? Clothes for school, dating girls, and definitely parts for motorcycles. I spent a lot of money in that area. And then I get into college, and I responded to an ad. So I worked for the motorcycle shops from 7th grade until my first year of college. Then I get into college, and I respond to an ad to sell cell phones. And I think, this will be great to do while I'm going to college. My first 30 days of selling cell phones, Garrett, I made $20,000 in 1993.
Which is like $5 billion today.
Exactly.
It is a lot.
It's around, today's dollars around $80,000 a month. 22 years old. I meet Wendy. We fall in love. We get married. We have our 2 kids, Kennedy and Caden. In all essence, I really thought I was living the American dream, making all this cash, married, kids, doing all this investing. And so I get into the financial services industry. And that's when I meet you, and I meet Ray, and I meet Les.
Our 2 business partners.
Yeah. And I wanted to learn about money. I'd been making all this money. I wanted to learn about money. I wanted to help other people with money at that time. And, before Ray and Les passed away in the plane crash in 2006, one day Les came to me and he says, hey.
And I mean, you say that kind of like, for people that don't know the story.
Well, we were just talking about it.
Yeah. We on another recording. And I mean, man, what a shock I was in shock when it happened. I mean, we had that plane and it leaves St. George where they were hosting an event. But the craziest part was when we were in that meeting, it was like, why don't you come down and speak? Yeah. And I was like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
And Ray never really did the speeches, but he's like, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just supposed to be him going down there.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do our radio show back in the days of radio, KTKK. And Les just texted me and he's like, hey, I'm going to go to St. George. It's warmer down there. I'm going to go have some fun. I'm like, oh, go. I'll just do the radio.
Yeah.
Didn't think about it. And I remember that night, again, I was tired because we were up to a lot and there was a lot going on and I had young kids. And so you don't always sleep well when the kids are young. They're sleeping romance terrace, let's face it, until they get to 4. Worth it, since my son's filming this. Worth it, buddy. But I remember falling asleep on the floor, like playing with my kids, and woke up with a thunderstorm warning on the TV. So it's like, comes across the bottom. I hear it because it has like that. They have that weird thunderstorm sound.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so I turn it off and go to bed. And then my landline rings, dude. I didn't know really that I gave my landline out. It was just my wife being like, well, what if our cell phones die? I'm like, she just was always paranoid. We had to have a landline. Yeah. And I ignored, I think it rang all the way through the first time. And then it rang again. So I picked it up and it was you.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, man, like the plane left last night and nobody's heard from Ray and Les. I turned on the TV and breaking news. It crashed into Utah Lake. Right. And it's like, these are 2 35-year-old men with 4 kids, and both of their spouses were pregnant.
Yeah.
With, coming with the 5th. And it's like, whoa, that was like a huge dose of reality. But fortunately, there's no real silver lining necessarily, other than they had prepared financially.
Yeah.
They had prepared financially.
Yeah.
They had their ducks in a row and in order, because I've met many attorneys that don't have their trust done properly because they're so busy helping everybody else out.
Yeah.
And that happens sometimes in the financial world, but those guys did have that kind of set up. And that was a big lesson of like dose of reality, and everything that kind of came from what we were doing and why we were doing it.
Yeah, we did this for a living, and it happened to them, our partners, and this is what we did every day of the week. I would have never guessed that ever in a million years.
Dude, I was so numb that was a Friday when you called me that morning. That Monday I went on the radio show to like show people like, oh, we're gonna be fine. We're gonna do this thing. And I think 2006, I was in my 20s, 26 probably, and it's like 27 maybe, and I just didn't realize we have 42 employees across our firm, and the ones that were the biggest office was their office, because it was a joint office, and then I had an office, and you had an office in different locations, and they were grieving, so they had no systems, bro. Like I love those guys, but they had zero. Like you and I were there was a train wreck there, and everybody's I don't know what to do, so I'm just like working to the point where I put on 20 pounds, 25 pounds, I think. I couldn't make simple decisions, and it was like so bad that we were in a meeting at like 7 p.m. one night, and you were like messing around with my phone, and you text Carrie, you're like, "Hey, are you naked?" or something, joking, and she's like,
I don't remember anything about that.
She's like, "I could be," and I'm like, "I'm out." And it was literally the first intimacy moment that her and I had, because that's how heavy everything was. Like we're just young and didn't know what's going on, but what it did is add this like connection to the work.
Yeah.
Because I always think of like Rockefeller method of, hey, we're gonna live, it's gonna go well, but my kids don't have to start from square one.
Yeah.
And their kids don't have to start from square one. We're not going to be reliant upon the banking system and the financial system. And we're going to make sure that if inflation's high, we've got a plan for that. And if interest rates don't cooperate, we've got a plan to compensate for that. Or if taxes go up, we've got all these contingencies. But when you're in the reality of it, like I was less his trustee, and I ended up turning it over to his, widow's brother, because he was an attorney. Because, dude, so many people were hitting them up for money, and it was like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, and he was so good at telling everybody no.
Yeah, you had to separate yourself from
it
that.
Spelled out in the document. Like without a trust, there would have been a mess.
Yeah.
Without insurance,
there
wouldn't have been the ability for them to continue going financially.
Yeah. Garrett, you and I think about this. Everyone else out there that's listening to this, clients that I meet with, they think about it. They think about the what if.
Yeah.
Right. And so we plan for both. Rockefeller method, yes, it's about legacy and it's about passing that on, but it's about today also.
Right. And the new version of our book, I know I'm going to talk about our book, but
for sure,
the new version that the first version didn't have is the family legacy rings. Because I was just discovering the family legacy rings at the time. I knew about part of it because in my early 20s, I shadowed someone that is actually a licensee now of the Rockefellers, which is so cool, because here's someone that we learned from. I was a pain in his ass, and he thought I was annoying because I always had my red memo pad asking thousands of questions, and I got my way into an event that was an advanced event 3 years into the business that you're supposed to have like certain credentials, and I just sent his wife flowers, who was registering the stuff and saying, please let me in, I won't say a word. And I really tried. I just tried to sit in the back of the room, but I'd go ask him on the breaks, and his glasses, his nose, he's like, what? But I was like fascinated, and I got to see this concept of a family office.
Yeah.
And the Rockefellers really coined that family office thing.
Oh, yeah.
Which was like, they were wealthy enough, they had their own financial team that only worked for their family. Attorneys, accountants,
in-house.
That were in-house, like all of this. And he was presenting a $400 million transaction, and the clients aren't in the room. It's just the family office there, vetting it, doing due diligence. And I was like, wow. So that gets talked about in this book, because I want to give myself more credit than I probably deserve, but I really feel like once I sat in that meeting, I was like, ooh, what we need to create is a virtual family office or a fractional family office, which was this notion that it was naive. But I was like, if we could get it where we could have attorneys that communicate with accountants, that communicate with investment advisors, that communicate with insurance professionals, and they could serve 100 families.
Yeah,
but,
make it accessible.
Right. So now it's there, because without it, I was doing all this research back then, the nerd that I was researching, I was finding out how come people would like not even use the same advisor as their parents, and then the money would go to somewhere else and it would be invested completely differently, or it'd be spent too quickly, and all these ramifications. And I was a huge fan of the book, The Millionaire Next Door, when I was a teenager, because it was kind of my family's philosophy too. Hey, if you just hold on, like my uncle, like, you know, he had one belt his whole life, I think. And, you know, but he died with millions, but you would have never known. He was kind of that guy, worked at the power plant his whole life from the time he was a teenager. So
miser.
Right. And, you know, I didn't ever feel that way when I was around him. Like, I didn't feel like he was stingy with us. I just felt like he didn't really spend anything on himself and just socked away. And one of the things that book doesn't talk about is what happens to families that don't know about it and they inherit money is they blow it. It creates entitlement. It creates conflict like you wouldn't believe. I've had issues in my own family. My grandfather called me once, and I'd just gotten the business. And when I first told him I was going to do this, and I was in college, it was fine. But you got to realize, like, his father didn't see his mother for 7 years because he came to America because he couldn't make ends meet, and she got pregnant. And he's like, I can't feed the family because I went to the dilapidated town that they live in, like beautiful scenery, not even a single restaurant. Like, it was, you know, it definitely was on the downhill, and it had been overtaken by the mob. And so he has to leave his wife because she's like, I'm not getting on a boat when we don't know if there's going to be enough food. And so he has to hike through these mountains to get to the port, gets to the port, lives off this thing called honey bread because it won't spoil, and it's like hard as a rock over time. He gets to Ellis Island, doesn't speak English well enough. They change his last name. He's so cross-eyed that I'm amazed he had the vision to come to America, but it was so cross-eyed he ended up in Carbon County, Utah. You know, and so he's going to be a coal miner, but there's a mine disaster, so he ends up as a goat herd.
Wow.
And he lives in a tent, and he sends back all the money he can. And there's no email. He's not making phone calls. He's sending, I don't know, letters. He's sending like whatever it was back then was like Western Union or something to get the money. And she finally they get enough to get her over to America, and he meets his daughter at 7 years old.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
And so you think about that kind of a situation, like they didn't have the Rockefeller method. They didn't have the methodology and the insights, and they didn't know any better. They just did the best they could, but it kind of infiltrates the family to be like, we got to hold on to what we got. And so when my grandfather calls, he says, hey, his sister had all of their money in a savings account that they had ever saved up, all in her name because she never got married. Like, they saw each other every day. He worked on her house, and, you know, they took care of her, and she just walked to the grocery store that she worked at, and she applied for welfare even though she had $550,000 plus in savings. And so the issue is he called because she was sick, and they didn't know if she was going to have to go into like a facility. And all the money that was really his sister Rosie's and his and hers, a third, was all in her name. And so now he's like, hey, can you help me? I was like, yeah, I think if we have some documentation of how the money got there, we can protect 2/3 of it. But there's this 3-year look back. We can't just move money because it's evasive towards the government programs now having to kick in versus your own cash.
Yeah.
And so we set up this plan that was very short term, where they were getting 3% a month, as you recall, and I didn't feel comfortable with it. So they're getting $3,000 a month on this $100,000, and the rest was in a fixed annuity, right? So the fixed annuity is just accumulating, and now what's nice about that is we could have 3 different owners, but one insured. She was the insured. We had her and my other, you know, my grandfather and my great aunt. And so my grandfather's like, this is amazing. And then I was like, I don't know how long this $3,000 a month is going to last, so let's go ahead and take that out and either put it back in a savings, or let's go ahead and just put that in this annuity. And he's like, okay. And then she recovers. 6 months later. She's able to go back home, And all of a sudden, she accuses him of stealing $3,000 a month. Even more, they accused my other aunt's daughters. This one, didn't have any kids, but, he had another sister that died, and all of their kids said, oh, Garrett's driving a Bentley. He used that money and stole it. So, like, they didn't talk for the last 8 years of her life over this accusation because they didn't do proper documentation. There was no trust. And so I remember I told my grandpa, I was like, hey, like, let's set up a trust for you, and let's make sure that everything's spelled out properly. By the way, he never got any of that money. It all went to nieces and nephews, and it was like a huge family ordeal because of a lack of planning. So not having a trust can absolutely decimate a family. You don't have to be worth $1 million to be in $1 million mishap. You don't have to have tons of money to spell out what you want done and have an agreement. So if anything like that happens, it's already agreed upon. It's already separated. It's already protected. And that was like when he started to realize I could really do this for a living, because he was really scared because he's like, hey, you're going to be a business owner?
Yeah.
Like, he was kind of a business owner. He played the accordion and would play in the bands on the weekend, and he had a TV repair shop, and everybody in the community loved him, and I'd go ride around in his little red van and see people give him money and tamales for fixing their Zenith TVs, these old pieces of furniture, essentially. And it was like that dude was my hero, and he ends up standing up for me because I didn't take the money.
Yeah.
And thank God we got it out of there, because that fund ended up going to zero because it was a hard money lending deal.
Yeah.
And that's where I really realized, like, we got my grandma to do the Rockefeller method. And so they had a home that was worth $39,000 when they died that was paid off. But they passed on an extra $250,000 to their heirs. Two of their heirs, my mom and her sister, used their inheritance to pay for all the co-payments and additional costs for kidney transplants.
Wow.
That's the difference it made.
Wow.
Right? And this is someone who, they were retired when they talked to me. And I think they were just meeting with me to be like, at first, like, hey, we'll give you a couple bucks that you could manage for us, and just to be nice, and we'll be your first client because we love you. But then the real situation happened, and then all of a sudden we built this whole plan. And because we had a trust, things didn't get messy for their family.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember my uncle being like, this seems like overkill. I'm like, guess what? The medical directive saved the family from being in turmoil over, do we pull the plug? My grandpa made his own decision on that. So they didn't have to make that decision. It was an act of love. So I know it's kind of a long story, but it's part of why the Rockefeller method means so much to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad that we wrote the book, because you just know the numbers in a way that I don't know them. Like, I know the philosophy, but you know the numbers.
Well, Garrett, before we move on, like, I want to stop for just a moment. Like, that story is extremely empowering. And I meet with clients on a daily basis that want those results in their life. They want those results.
And have you had have you ever had someone say they're too old?
Oh, yeah.
My grandma started her plan at 70 and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. So people think about this. People hear about those stories. They have their own stories in their own families, and they want this in their life. And by having this Rockefeller method in their life, the way that you and I write it out in this book, step by step, they're empowered on a daily basis. They're enjoying life more on a daily basis. They're producing more. They're enjoying more. They're actually able to be present in life today. They're able to maintain control versus relinquishing all this control, and they're getting their life back.
Do you have policies on your grandson?
Yes, we do.
How cool is that? You have a grandson who is just a ball of light and so much fun.
Yeah, man.
I love the videos you send
about him.
So you have these policies on your grandson.
Yeah.
You didn't come from money, and you've created a legacy at 53 years old that's certain.
My wife, Wendy, and I, our family name, Michael and Wendy Isom, will live on for generations. Garrett, and because of that reality, I wake up on a daily basis more empowered, more present, enjoying life at greater depths than I ever have before. And that's exactly what I want for everybody that goes through this process, is to have that in their life.
Well, let's talk about that, because it wasn't smooth sailing. I mean, let's tell your story, dude.
Yeah. So before Ray and Les died in the plane crash, Les introduced me to Investor Guy. And Investor Guy, Les was making great money with Investor Guy. I trusted Les. I did my due diligence. I met with Investor Guy. And Investor Guy promised to pay me 5% a month on my cash. You're talking about 3% a month. He promised to pay me 5% a month. So I gave him $50,000. And I'm getting $2,500 a month checks. I'm like, this is pretty damn good. So I give him another $250,000 and the checks kept coming. So I'm like, here's another $500,000. Now I've got $800,000 with Investor Guy and the checks kept coming.
I want to ask one question. With the interest that was coming in, did you spend that the same way you would have spent your hard-earned money?
No. Yeah. No.
People don't realize that, right?
Yeah, definitely not. And there's huge values and core values that I'm clear about today and that we have in our family legacy trust as a result of that experience.
And the fact that you've captured that.
Yes.
And you tell the story. You wrote the book, What We're Worth, telling the story in there. The first person that's important for is you, but then the second is your family.
Yeah.
Then the world. And it's like you actually, because I can't remember if it was Scott Donald or Chris Smith. They both have really great concepts around what we're talking about here as far as family goes. And they said, if you want to kill a family, you kill their chief storyteller. And
So
and
true.
I know Chris is like, if you have 20 resilient stories that you could share, my great-grandfather's story that all my kids know, my dad being a coal miner, like as they understand that resilience and they understand that we make mistakes and I've made these, investment mistakes in the past, like that actually, then they don't feel isolated. They don't feel as guilty or shameful. And there's so much guilt and shame around money. So that's a gift that you gave to your family.
Thank you. And Garrett, you inspired me to write that book. I hid from it for years.
We're at this table right here where we talked about it.
Yeah. So grateful for that. So I'm making all this cash flow. I'm definitely not valuing money the way I would had I earned it all myself. I was relinquishing control. I wasn't aware of all of this at the time. I am now. Hindsight's 2020. But I'm thinking to myself, man, I wonder if my client Joe would want to get in on this. What about Kathy, Bill? Next thing I know, we've got over $10 million with Investor Guy, and the checks kept coming. Big checks. Until August of 2007, no checks. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't good, right? And September, no checks. Garrett, I'm starting to freak the fuck out.
Yeah.
Investor Guy stops taking my calls. August, September 2007, October, November, December. And during that time, I get a call from the FBI. I answer it. I didn't know it was the FBI. I answer the phone. It's the FBI. Hello, this is Special Agent Mark Smith from the FBI. We understand you have investment dealings with Investor Guy. We need to talk. Dude, you want to talk about next level stress? I'm 6'3".
Your butt puckered.
Dude, more than that. I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. I'm healthy today. I feel amazing, natural, just incredible health. I went down to 170 pounds from stress and anxiety. I'm drinking excessively. I'm a complete asshole to everyone around me. The money was completely gone. Over $4.8 million of my family's entire life savings gone, and over $10 million of our clients' cash completely gone. So during that time, I end up signing a deal with the feds, and I wear a wire for the FBI. I wanted to find out where the money went, but it was too late. It was gone. It was completely gone. And so
Cars and billboards.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I turned to the bottle of alcohol to numb myself out. Narcotic pain pills. I was doing everything to mask myself from the pain that I was experiencing. And I wasn't healthy. 2008, 2009, 2010, I couldn't keep the business together. I had to shut everything down completely. And it was October of 2010. And it was first thing in the morning, I hear a knock on our front door, and I go to the door, and it's my wife's family there. her parents-in-law, or her parents and siblings and nephews, and 2 big U-Haul trucks are backing up into the driveway of our home. And they said, we're here for Wendy and the kids. They're moving out. And I couldn't blame them. I knew I wasn't healthy to be around. And 12 hours later, I found myself alone in our home. Wendy and the kids gone. Garrett, I'll never forget the look in our kids' eyes as they were sat in the back of the car as Wendy drove away from them. I felt worthless. I found myself on the bathroom floor that night, and I loaded a bullet in the chamber of a Ruger P89 pistol, and I pressed it up against the roof of my mouth. Dude, I had a bullet in the chamber, Garrett. I had my finger on the trigger, and I was screaming to God, why, God, why? And fortunately, I had a rush come over my body that I'd never felt before. I carefully set the gun down, and I promised to God and myself in that moment that I would extract the lessons that led to that point of putting that gun in my mouth, apply those lessons in my life, and share them with as many people as I possibly could. And you're one of the first people that I called after that. And I remember you sitting down with me and saying, Michael, you can choose to leverage your past to create moving forward. And like that clicked for me. That clicked. That was an answer to my prayers.
What did that mean to you? When I said, like, what did translate that?
Then I can write the book, What We're Worth, that I can share this message right now with you. And I've shared this message literally thousands of times with clients. And it's allowed me to get clear about what I stand for and what I don't stand for, the core family values of the Michael and Wendy Isom Family Legacy Trust, the clarity around what you and I have put in this book, What Would the Rockefellers Do? So Garrett, I sobered up and I went to work. And I'm happy to report that 45 days later, I moved back in with Wendy and the kids, and I continued to go to work. And you opened up an opportunity with me, and I started working with you again in 2011. And thank God we had the inspiration that was delivered to us in 2016.
And I'll just mention that inspiration. Like, we don't need to hide it.
Okay.
We were working together. I was building a company.
Yeah.
And I thought I was doing the mature thing, which was let this company grow and delegate and have people that ran certain chains of command and have a CEO. And I was a content creator and they were running the operations. And he would always say, anything below the line, you don't worry about, I'll handle it. You just focus on the, on marketing, and you focus on content creation. I got it. And a lot of people in the organization would never tell me what's going on because they didn't want to burden me or bother me.
We were producing at a high level during that.
Very high level. And I called you and I said, hey, dude, you know what? Sometimes we like to go to Vegas between Christmas and New Year's because there's like this dead zone there before New Year's gets nuts. Yeah. And we found this penthouse for a good price. I'm like, dude, let's go down. We can go race some go-karts. We could just talk about the next year.
With Wendy and Carrie.
And so we go down there, and Caden was there too. And I just remember you said, dude, I haven't had a single referral for 4 months.
Through your office.
Through my office. I was like,
sharing referrals with me.
What?
Yeah.
I had no idea. So I sent a message to one of our coaches like, company guy.
Investor guy and company guy.
Company guy said, we're not sending him to Michael anymore, unbeknownst to me.
Yeah. And me.
I was pretty pissed. I mean, I didn't handle the moment great, but I didn't attack anyone. And I just, once I vented, because I remember outside and I was like pacing around. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I said, all right, let's write a book. Who cares? I know that I'm the majority owner of that company, but this is an unfair deal. And you do such a good job with the clients, and we'll write a book together. You can go on stage and speak and teach the message. And so, I was like, I've been writing a lot. I'll do a lot of the writing. You do a lot of the math. like the no versus hope is a lot of your message in there, and a lot of the economic value of certainty because of the experience you had that you just shared. And we wrote this book that I remember, I don't know if you remember, I put it up for sale on Amazon for $1,000 because I'm like, dude, this book, like a lot of financial people are going to not do this right, and they're going to just try to get it. Yeah. And we had to update the book because of that. As a matter of fact, we had to create a licensing program so that we knew that it's truly the legacy method, process that they're utilizing. And so we wrote, that's how what with the Rockefellers, out of a difficult situation, we end up creating, and that's part of being a victor versus a victim.
Yeah.
We're a victim of a circumstance. We keep renumerating the past, and we keep wishing it were different, and we focus too much on it, and we regret, and we guilt and shame and feel stupid and feel all those feelings. We feel jealous. We feel all of those feelings because our future starts to diminish.
Yeah.
And this is a lot of why marriages don't work, is when they don't have their money right, they stop thinking about the future and they think about what's no longer there. And so the book comes out, and, we just self-published it, and it was a hardcover, and, started getting a few reviews, and I gave it to some people that were like, well, I want to do something. I'm like, yeah, Mike's your guy. And, and so that's really how the book came out.
Yeah. It worked really well.
And then I started to discover the family legacy ring. So we talked family office, but then I also discovered like family retreat. Someone sent me a video of David Rockefeller, and David Rockefeller was talking about how he didn't know how wealthy his family was because they didn't even live in the main house. And then he found out from his classmates. So they started inviting him to the family retreat, and he talked about these family retreats. And then one of my really good friends that really well, Rich Christensen, was really dedicating his life to like raising his children. And he had done this amazing job. And I was having him help my wife and I.
Yeah, he coached me.
I was like, dude, I want to do better with my kids. I want to do better. And he's like, okay. We went to his house. He showed me some of his traditions. He showed me his family mission statement. He showed me like what happens when they turn 8, 10, 12, 14. They start a business, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, where is this? He's like, well, it's just, I'm like, you have to share it with the world. And he was so reluctant. He's like, it's really tender and private. I'm like, dude, it is so impactful. And so he then spoke at Harvard and sat next to this guy at the dinner that was like a religious teacher, basically. And he's like, did you know that every business and every religion have 3 things in common? Rituals, traditions, and symbols. And I was like, and Rich and me is like, and he had all 3 in his family. Their daily rituals, their family traditions, like the Saturday tradition they did. And then, they actually had a crest, and it was designed on their shirts and on their hats. I made a medieval crest when I built mine and had him. But I was like, okay, so this family retreat is how do you invest in your heirs along the way? Right? So that came out in this book. And then the family constitution. So just like you wrote What We're Worth, imagine if everyone on the planet wrote a book for their family. And not like a long book, like mine's 38 pages. The more succinct, the better. It was 52. I was able to trim it down because I want it to be read. And it was like, here's the most important philosophies, ideas. Here's the signposts. I want them to have freedom of expression and career choice and all those things. But I also want this to be sustainable so they don't just get money when they turn a certain age. And so the Rockefeller method is really using those family legacy rings with insurance and trusts. Right? So the insurance is cash along the way. You buy it on yourself, you buy it on your spouse, you buy it on your kids, you buy it on your grandkids, and every time someone dies, it replenishes the trust. So the family has capital.
And,
right?
And it's not a replacement item in a family's life. It's an and asset. Right. It's
as our friend Caleb says. Wrote the book.
That's right.
And asset.
They use it with everything else that they have going on. So they're not giving up stuff. It's actually an enhancer.
Right. And what's cool is I even pay my kids for actual work. Like my son, when he was 13, opened for my comedy special that's on Amazon Prime. Right? People probably get tired of hearing me say, I got a comedy special on Amazon Prime, but it was such a cool experience. Garrett. And so he got paid for that. Breck's been filming for a while now, right? He's 19 now, but he got paid for, like, I didn't pay him to mow the lawn. I paid him to read books. They didn't do a good job with that. But now Breck's just reading books on his own. Like he got off Instagram. He's like, I'm just reading a book. And it was like one of my friend's book, Joe Stump. And I'm like, oh, that's a great book to read. So, it's cool to watch that instilled. So that family constitution is a preamble to someone's trust in layman's terms that are most important stories, ideas, lessons, so that hopefully you don't have to learn all the same hard ones again. It's not going to be perfect, but it's capitalizing and capturing the contribution and saying that's now part of it. So in the new book, we have all those aspects. In addition to the right type of insurance.
Yep.
See, risk has consequence. And you eloquently shared this story about when you took risk outside of your investor DNA. And, and I talked about me being greedy and making the mistake, and and we're in speculation and gambling, but we're calling it investing. There's no control. There's no exit strategy. There's no mitigation and downside protection. It had a consequence of you putting a gun in your mouth.
Yes. Yes.
And people very coy are showing big numbers on illustrations that are not rooted in reality.
Yep.
And they don't understand that 20, 30, 40 years from now, there's a chance of that lapsing and going away and becoming a taxable event. So no, there's not even insurance. And so those are not Rockefeller methods. So we outline what is properly structured, what is optimally funded.
What does that really
What are one
mean?
of the 7 companies that actually still do this and have been doing it for over 150 years?
Yeah.
With hundreds of billions and sometimes $1 trillion in assets.
Makes all the difference in the world.
And it's just like kind of rare, I'd call it like a rare bastion. It's like where else can you mitigate risk to that level?
Yeah.
And it's not an investment. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a process that is wealth capture, that is wealth preservation. It is an alternative to bonds because any 30-year period of time, these 7 companies have beat bonds through dividends after expenses. Any 30-year period of time. So that's pretty amazing. And it comes along with all these bonuses.
Yeah. Well, Garrett, we're clear in the introduction of the book about where to take risk and where not to.
Right. In your business.
Yeah. Areas that you have
on a motorcycle for you.
areas where you have control, you have knowledge and experience and expertise. For most people, that's their business. That's the career that they're in, right? Anybody that I meet with and I we get down to what they're doing, what's put the most amount of money in their pocket, what will continue to put the most amount of money in their pocket is their ability to produce in their area of expertise at the highest level.
Yeah, so say what AIS is, because you have this company, Vault AIS. What does that mean?
Yeah, and we talk about it in the introduction of the book a little bit, but Vault AIS are the 3 main lessons that I extracted that led to that point of putting the gun in my mouth. So AIS, number 1 asset, number 1 investment, number 1 strategy. Number 1 asset, I'm going to get clear. We get clear with each client that we meet with around their property value balance sheet and their human life value.
So property value is everything we touch. This book is property value. These chairs, this
Real
iPad,
estate, cash investments.
Yeah, it's physical things, right? Human life value is who we are that makes us who we are. It's our character. It's our knowledge. It's our mental capital. It's our integrity. It's all of those intangible things that manifest the physical things.
Yeah.
Right? So, and everything we have in the property value world is a stewardship that comes from how we effectively mine and extract and express our human life value.
Yeah.
And so, we talk about human life value in the book because it's amazing. How many times have you seen this? I mean, you've met with so many more people one-on-one than I have, but how many people have property value protected and human life value exposed?
Yeah, 100%.
Their car's protected.
Yeah.
Their home's protected.
Yep.
Their life's not protected.
Yeah.
Liability's not protected.
Yeah.
Disability's not protected.
Yeah.
Because it's the intangible things that are valuable, that are hard to put a price on because they're intrinsically valuable, not extrinsically valuable, although they do have extrinsic value when we express them.
Well said.
But it's that the only, it's like Investor Guy did teach us a few good things. One thing he said was like, and maybe this was more Les that might have said this first. I know I didn't say it. And he said, a house isn't an asset. The person that pays for the house is the asset.
Yeah.
A house in the Sahara Desert with no water and utilities, no matter how beautiful it is, if you don't have the key to get in, not an asset.
Yeah.
If you don't utilize it, not an asset.
Yeah.
There's people that have things they never utilize. That's not an asset. It's like, it's got to be utility to it.
Yeah. So that distinction, and well said, Garrett. I had put my self-worth in my property value balance sheet. And when I lost all that cash and actually went to a negative, I felt worthless. Now the clarity that I have is that my self-worth comes from my human life value balance sheet. I look at both today, but I first look at my human life value balance sheet. I look at the assets on there. I look at the liabilities. Some liabilities could be limiting mindsets, fear, doubt, worry, that scarcity that takes me into scarcity. And what's really empowering about this for all of us and the Rockefeller method and what I share with clients on a daily basis is that human life value is what actually creates all the property value. We want to create property value. We want to create more assets. We want to produce more value in the marketplace in exchange with other people. But if we'll put more emphasis on our human life value balance sheet and growing ourself and our intellectual capital, we'll then use that to create more property value at a higher level.
And this is an example of that.
Yes.
What would the Rockefellers do as an example? Because it's basically taking all of the human life value and organizing it for other people to understand this methodology of the Rockefeller method, which we look as this is an asset. But it's an asset when someone reads it.
Yes.
It's an asset when someone, and so what do?
Implements.
We take 100% of every book sold and reinvest it back into getting ads to get this book in people's hands. And we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
100%.
Because, and we just filmed videos today. It's all about how can we make sure people engage in reading it.
Yeah.
We rewrote
Take
thinking
action.
like, what can we do to make this the most easy and accessible to understand? And like even in doing the audiobook, recording and re-recording, because it's all about like, how do you create that value for someone? Because in Killing Sacred Cows, my biggest concept is if you grow your money and don't grow yourself, that gap is called risk. So when you're at $10 million, or how much was your own money, $4.4 million or whatever it was, but you didn't know how, if investor guy dies, could you create that return?
No.
And that's the reason I made other mistakes, but that's the reason I didn't make that mistake is like I could never replicate this. So if he's gone, I would have these assets. I couldn't replicate that return. So it wasn't a good stewardship for me, because if I grow my money and don't grow myself, that risk creates worry. Scarcity diminishes production. It robs us of enjoyment of life.
Yep.
It destroys peace of mind. It infiltrates our thoughts that robs us from being present with our spouse. It robs us from being present with our kids. And it steals wealth, because wealth is a byproduct of a life well lived. Wealth is being present.
Yes.
And most financial advice is stop being present so that one day you can finally have what you want. And chase that thing that you want so that one day you can finally stop doing things and just spend the money. It's like missing out on memories along the way, and you can't buy back the memories you never have.
Yep. Yeah. So this property value, human life value under number one asset.
It's like a mirror, right?
We want client. Yes.
So we have like property value on this side. We have human life value. Oh, sorry, that's actually exactly wrong. We have human life value on this side. We have property value on this side. And so this human life value comes in the form of skills. It could be communication. It could be anything from like sales.
Knowledge,
it could be
experience,
writing.
education.
It could be financial intelligence. It could be understanding how to leverage and utilize AI. It could be business knowledge, how to acquire a business. It could be, all these things. And when we utilize these, and there's a bridge that goes between human life value and property value, and this bridge is either called business, relationships, or value creation. In serving others, in solving their problems, and in adding value, the byproduct becomes money.
Yeah.
So money chases value, specifically applied human life value.
And the Rockefeller method allows clients to leave both.
Right, because it's like, hey, especially when using the family legacy rings, right, which look like this. We have, in the very middle of this is the Rockefeller method, okay? So we have the family office.
Yep.
We have the family retreat. And we have the family constitution.
And spelled out in the book eloquently, too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So family retreat to family constitution, rituals, traditions, and symbols. That connects this, right? What connects the family office? Trusts, which have the family constitution in it, spells out how this operates, and insurance.
Yeah.
So now the family office, we're getting it on the kids, and they're understanding that they're going to have a heritage, not an inheritance, that they're going to have a way to add more value, not just be entitled to money. And so this right here is the Rockefeller method spelled out in a Venn diagram. And when the book outlines it, then it personalizes it to the individual.
Yep. Well said. Yeah. So number one asset, property value, human life value. It's all about the person. So you are the number one asset.
Yep.
You, the individual. Number one investment has two main characteristics, control and human life value. It's that conversation around what you control and have the most knowledge, experience, and expertise in is what has and will continue to put the most amount of cash in your pocket. That's your career or the business that you own and operate. Is real estate a good investment? Is crypto a good investment? It depends on the investor. You taught me this, Garrett.
Yeah.
It depends on, what's that?
You're welcome. This is smart ass.
And so we want clients to take risk. Tony Robbins at Unleash the Power Within taught me about the 4 basic needs of every individual: certainty, uncertainty, significance, and love. A basic need we will fulfill. Uncertainty is variety and risk. We will fulfill that need. You will fulfill that need of variety and uncertainty in your life. Be deliberate about having that in your life and fulfilling that. I wasn't deliberate about it. I wasn't aware of it. I was fulfilling it, but I wasn't being deliberate about it. So we want people to have investments, but in areas where they have control and knowledge and experience and expertise. That's number 1 investment. Number 1 strategy: cash that you're going to relinquish control of. Keep it GPL, guaranteed, protected, and liquid. And that's why we use whole life insurance that's properly structured and optimally funded. So it's such a tongue twister.
Just saying that in the audiobook over and over again.
I know, right?
I would be like, unique New York.
Yeah.
Peculiarly brilliant Italian William. Yeah.
So when we have cash outside of our control that's guaranteed, protected, and liquid in whole life insurance, it mainly protects our courage and confidence so we can continue to not only enjoy life, but produce in the highest areas of our area of expertise.
Peace of mind and production.
Peace of mind and production. Nothing will outproduce that. Clients want this.
Yeah.
They want this in their life. They just don't know that it's possible.
So check this out, Mikey. Human life value. Victim or victor?
Yep.
Okay. So a loss of 4.4 million, right? If you go, I'm stupid. I wish this were different.
Yep. It's not my fault.
Blame, guilt, shame, past focused.
Felt all of that.
Right? You go, this is what leads to poverty.
That's what led to putting a gun in my mouth and me just trying to survive for over 3 years.
Right. So if we have our investment dollars going to increase our human life value, and people kind of like understand this to a small degree, but it's not as effective as it could be. They're like, oh, I went to college and the university. I'm like, yeah, well, I learned more my first year out. I was like, I invested more my first year out than I did the 4 years I went, because now it was like specialized. It was specific. It was like, how do I, right? So if we invest in our human life value, then what we do is we become a victor. You lose the 4.4 million and you become vulnerable. You become convicted. You use it to propel value. You use it to understand that you've got to increase your human life value so that you don't get back into the situation. Yeah. You write a story from that day forward versus live the story from the past. Right? So like this is the key. And I sold my business for a lot less than I felt I should have, and ended up not getting the licensing deal to work how I wanted. And I felt stupid for it, because I would have made sure a client didn't make the mistake. But when we're too close to it, our high emotion lowers our IQ.
Yep.
And sometimes we try to do too much on our own because we think it's going to save us money, or we think that we're so smart. And it's just nice to have outside perspective. So how do we increase our human life value? Well, the first is you got to have a mentor. And what a mentor does is ask you questions you don't know how to ask yourself.
Yep.
And then you find the answers within. That's number one.
Yep.
The second thing is you want to coach. So let me give an example of Alan Dick. Alan is, he writes my programming for like my food intake combined with Deborah on the specific foods I have. And then the specific 16-day reset program I did for the food. And then the workouts I do with progressive overload. And I went from 220 pounds down to 187 and a half, and just lean and all that. Yeah. And now I'm at 207 and a half at about 10% and strong. And it's because he told me specifically what to do and I followed it. That's coaching. The third is you've got to have systems and you've got to have processes to support. So the Rockefeller method is a system and process.
Yep.
So if someone meets with you because they go through the book and they're like, okay, I'm gonna meet with you or one of the people you've trained, then you're going to operate as a mentor and a coach for them. You're going to ask them questions to do discovery, to find out what they want, help them what their legacy is, and even the tools that we've created with AI with our business partners.
Supports all of that.
What we found is like now we can actually help them develop the family legacy rings properly. You could help fill in the gaps on the team, but then we're using the Rockefeller method as the system and process of how it all works.
Yep.
But the fourth thing, and this is key, is accountability is how we're really going to develop our human life value. Because when we get into a place of we're out of flow, or we have things that don't go according to plan, or we have a health challenge, like it's good to have someone that we could be accountable to so that we're not just at the fleeing moment of our emotion and having that sabotage us. But this is the key. And what that does is that develops our human life value so that we're a victor. And you're a victor when you create the life you don't want to retire from.
Yeah.
You're a victor when you build a life that you love.
Yep.
You're a victor where circumstance is a lesson, not a loss.
Yeah.
Right? This is the key. So this is kind of the model overall. And when people understand that with Rockefeller method, then it hurts my heart to see people putting people in risky insurance that doesn't have that certainty, because when they're 60 or 70 and it fails, how are they going to feel?
Oh, man.
What's that going to mean to their family?
Yeah.
What's it going to do to their legacy?
Yeah, it's devastating.
You just cannot. There isn't a substitute of how that handles. Not having a trust means you leave it in the hands of the court and it becomes probate.
Yeah.
And in probate, if you have kids under 18, there could be real problems there. But also, it's all public knowledge. We could look at James Gandolfini. We could look at Prince. We could look at Howard Hughes, who was a businessman, didn't have trust. All that went through probate, and Howard Hughes was a 20-year debacle because he didn't have kids. It ended up going to like cousins and stuff like that. But it took him forever. Think of the expense, the time lost, all this unnecessary pain. And look, this is so effective that not only did the Rockefellers pass on wealth for generation after generation after generation after generation, so did the people that worked for them.
Yep.
They used the same methodology.
Yep.
And so I felt like we put extraordinary effort in making this even simpler and straightforward. And I mean, let's see how many pages this one is. We're talking about 172 pages for legacy.
Yeah.
Like that's 25 years of work, distilled in this. And a lot of it is things we discovered that we didn't create. I've only been alive for 46 years. So it's the study, the discovery, and unveiling the system and process. But if you have someone that doesn't mentor you in the Rockefeller method, then you have missing pieces to the family constitution or the family retreat. If you don't have someone that coaches you, you might end up buying, like yesterday I was with someone, Joshua Sprague, who loves our book.
Yeah.
And he said he just tried to do it on his own. He bought the wrong insurance.
Yeah.
So then he had to get someone that was certified, right? WholeLifeCertified.com will take to someone that's certified based upon their circumstance. We match it up so that the results are certain, certified and certain.
That's it,
right?
Yeah. That's why we created it.
Right. So, I mean, look, let's just look at what ChatGPT has uncovered from the work that we've done as a little thing here. I just said, tell me, ChatGPT, what would the Rockefellers do? What's the core tenets of the Rockefeller method? It said, well, number one, perpetual wealth building focuses on building a family fortune that can last for generations. The family wealth is reinvested and grown over time while providing for current and future generations with the use of a life insurance as a financial tool. High cash value, whole life insurance policies are used to provide death benefits for future generations, serve as a source of tax-free loans for family needs, business investments, education, leverage and liquidity. Life insurance policies offer cash value that can be accessed during the policyholder's lifetime, creating liquidity while preserving the underlying capital. Family governance establishes the family mission statement and structured governance to align family members on financial goals, responsibilities, and values. Annual or regular family meetings educate members on financial management to ensure adherence to the family legacy plan. Asset protection, which protects assets from creditors, lawsuits, divorces, poor financial decisions by beneficiaries. Trust and legal entities, are used to safeguard family wealth. Tax minimization minimizes estate, income, and gift taxes through advanced trust planning. Keeps assets within the family trust system to defer or reduce taxable events. Generational equity distribution ensures that every generation benefits from the family wealth while also encouraging productivity, financial education, and entrepreneurship. Trust required for the Rockefeller method to implement the Rockefeller method effectively. It's this: perpetual trust. Key feature designed to last for multiple generations or indefinitely in states that allow perpetuity. Purpose: keep assets within the family, avoiding estate tax for successive generations. Benefits: offers creditor protection, tax efficiency, and control over distributions. Domestic asset protection trust holds life insurance policies outside of the taxable estate. Purpose: provides liquidity for estate taxes and other expenses while ensuring tax-free payouts to the trust. Benefits: protects life insurance proceeds from creditors and estate taxes. Family trust, both revocable and irrevocable, holds and manages family assets like real estate, businesses, and investments. Purpose: centralizes asset management and aligns the family's financial goals. Benefits: simplifies wealth management and provides protection. Charitable trust, this is optional. Key feature: allows for tax-efficient charitable giving while retaining some control or benefits. Creates a legacy of philanthropy in line with family values. Reduces taxable estate and provides ongoing charitable contributions and cash flow. So what are the key steps? Well, this is pretty amazing because ChatGPT's done a really good job.
Yeah, man,
But-
I love hearing all that.
But here's what it can't do by itself. We're using the tools where you can have a conversation with AI to build the family constitution, or you can type it in and it can get done in an hour versus it took me 3 days.
Yeah.
Right? A family crest could be generated in 5 to 15 minutes as the first piece. So like we built this in, if someone buys the book and they want the course, we built the whole course with all these great AI tools to support it. But why I'm not worried at all about AI replacing this is because even though it's really spot on with what it's talking about, mentoring helps to unveil what the individual wants. Stories inspire to keep us on track so that we're not tempted with greedy offers that come along the way that diminish the actual value. And actually having some human being that you could share your life and story and celebrate the wins and get personal feedback based upon what your family wants and is dealing with, so it's customized. That's the key. And that's what's exciting to me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is pretty cool that it has this, what you need to do as far as funding the trust and establishing governance, which is talking about creating the family mission statement, which is really, we've expanded it to the family constitution, which is mission statement's part of it. Family guidance is part of it. Family values is all part of that family constitution. We have a whole process for that. And then use whole life insurance. But what it isn't saying on the life insurance is which company, what's properly structured and optimally funded, right? Who's the beneficiary supposed to be, right? And then how do you educate your heirs? It says to do that. So how do you do that? So this is pretty cool that the Rockefeller method could be multi-generational wealth protection, shielding from risk, encourages responsible inheritance because there's incentivization inside of it, tax efficiency to eliminate estate and gift taxes and maintain a family legacy through a well-structured plan. Like, dude, how exciting is that?
Dude, I'm smiling ear to ear to think, Garrett, that we pioneered this in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, because before you had to be a family office.
Yeah.
And now you don't. Yeah. And so when we started this, I mentioned, special needs trust could be added into the Rockefeller method trust plan. If you have a child that, maybe they're Down syndrome, for example, you can have special ways that, who will take care of them and that there's money for that. Yeah. And you won't disinherit them for maybe some government assistance if that's important. And you can spell out the extra care and the things that are really important. So like, that they're taken care of. We're talking about revocable trusts, which are kind of transparent while you're alive. They don't offer any protection, but it spells what you want to happen when you die.
Yep.
And then when you do die, it becomes irrevocable at that point, and then it's protected, and you can spell that out. But irrevocable trust, the wealthier you are, the more you want to look at an irrevocable trust. Like a domestic asset protection trust in the United States means you don't have to go offshore, and it becomes so onerous to get to your assets. And you get to choose the distribution trustee, which means you still have access to your money, but you own nothing, control everything, which is a Rockefeller sentiment, right? So we talked about that. We've talked about our stories and a lot of this. And, look, if you just go ahead and go to Garrett B. Gunderson on Instagram, give me a little follow. There's daily doses and nuggets on all this. But if you put WWRD, we'll give you a PDF. If you want to buy a hardcover, you just got to cover the shipping. We'll cover the cost of the book. And if you want the audiobook, give us a penny more, little skin in the game. as long as we still have pennies. The Doge might get rid of pennies, so we might have to change this whole thing. But you know, if this touch moved or inspired you, if you feel like, hey, I'm a coal miner's son. You come from, your dad was getting Social Security at age 65.
Yep.
You know, like you can do it. And if you have a ton of wealth, we have higher end offices that you've been coordinating with that help people do this kind of stuff. We've got the attorney that I think is the best in the world at the Rockefeller method that we've brought into the fold that we can make it more affordable for people to have this because of the efficiency of paralegals and things like this. Like legacy is something you deserve, whether you're at the lowest moment of your life, like Mike shared, or whether you're at the best moment right now or anywhere in between, whether you're single and 19 like I started with. It just is an act of love and being proactive. If you have love and proactivity, you can have a legacy.
Yeah, Garrett, I'm living what's possible, having all of this in my life. I know you are too. But again, I wake up on a daily basis with more purpose and more passion. And I truly feel like I'm living my best life right now. And I know, I don't hope, I know that this will continue to pass on to my kids, to my grandkids, our grandson, Weston, our granddaughter that's going to be born here in a few weeks. And, I feel worthy of this incredible life. I want to live a long, healthy life. And I want all of you to have this in your life too. That's why we put this in this book. That's why we have a whole team that can assist you to have this in your life too.
All right. There you have it. Create a life you don't want to retire from. Build a life you love. Integrate and implement the Rockefeller method. And, create the legacy that lasts.